Battery last.
Uh-oh.
Yeah, it's a big. I know, but I think 2 hours. Yeah.
You have a good business trip?
Yeah, they're pretty good. I go to South Dakota. To Ellsworth Air Force Base up there.
Once.
Yeah, it's one of the two primary bomber squadrons.
Oh,
They're located, so they had a airman mess up a fastener in the big like wing splice area. And so we had to go fix it for them.
How long were you there?
We were only there for 3 days, but it was 2 travel days there and back, so.
Oh, you drove.
Yeah, we had to take out our equipment, so,
Oh,
yeah. I'm the subject matter expert for a big self-feeding version. A lot of people call it the quacking bush, because that's like the first people that made it forever ago. But yeah, that thing, when you set it up, it's like this long, it's a big L shape. But that's one of those, that's some you use if you want like a lot of precision. Because we have to check the hole afterwards, and it's gotta be. You'll see defects of the 10,000th of an inch.
oh,
Yeah.
Yeah, it's very.
You're dealing with an airplane full of. Yeah, that one, it has to be.
Mhm. But the weather was like 90 was the hottest it got old.
that's the.
Mhm.
So I don't. Oh, yeah.
Mhm.
Well, right.
Yeah, I hadn't been up there before. It's that whole like Black Hills area around Rushmore and everything. Yeah. I could go back when I have more free time.
I had a friend, like, middle school. Oh, yeah, freshman in high school. Moved from South Dakota. It was like 40 degrees. South Dakota.
All right, gang, how's everybody on the call?
Hello, doing good.
Good. Okay. So we're gonna work for about an hour on some database stuff, and then we will learn a little bit about Mongoose. And then we'll do some API and React stuff after that. So it should be about 3 hours today, I think. You have your instructions, and I just pasted that in Slack. So go to the link I just sent. And what we're starting with is the MongoDB exercise. So you'll need to have an Atlas account set up, a database set up in Atlas, and you'll need to have Compass installed for this. So if you haven't done that, then do that first, and the instructions for doing that are in the homework. Once you've done that, you will import this sample Airbnb data set. So this isn't exactly how Airbnb stores their data, or and I'm not even sure if they technically use MongoDB or not, but somebody like scraped Airbnb and made this data set. But the way that it's formatted is how you would, like, if Airbnb did use MongoDB, then the way that this data is formatted is the way that they would actually do it. So when you get this imported into your database, it's very similar to how actual data would be sorted production for Airbnb. So it's pretty simple to import data in Compass. So whenever you have Compass open, you can go to a database and a collection. And you can do, if it's like an empty collection, there's like a big import data button. But you'll see it kind of looks like import file, and then you just say, hey, this is a JSON file, and here's the file. And the file that I've given you is already formatted correctly to import. So if you do that correctly, then you'll see about 5,000 records in your database for like sample Airbnb data. So once you get it imported, then you're going to be trying to answer a few different questions that I've listed here. And you do that by filtering or sorting. And then whenever you do filters, it'll give you, some of the questions are like, give me the count. And some of them are like finding a specific record. So whenever you do a filter, the count is always displayed automatically by Compass whenever you run the query. So people on the call, you can work together if you want to and have somebody drive. And I don't know, just 2 and 2 maybe here, or however you guys want to do it. But yeah, start answering these questions that I've listed in the README. Are you guys doing okay on the call? Are you able to connect to your database?
Check that box on the time series.
No, don't check that.
Yes, I'm able to connect.
Okay,
Yeah, I'm doing okay.
good. Okay.
I'm working on the first query right now. I'm not sure what I'm typing wrong here. I did this right here. I put it in the chat.
Have to query in the order of that it's entered in the database. So for us to learn the query, we're gonna have to reference.
Is that not right? What I just put in the chat.
Are you doing it in, let me show something real quick. So. So when you are in. You guys all may want to pay attention to this. So when you are in Compass. You have like your databases kind of listed over here. And then
Yes.
when you click on a database, there's the collections within it. So I made an Airbnb database and that has a listing and reviews collection. We also have our OK Coders database from last class that had our menu collection. You would click on these and then you'll see this tab over here, which you can have more than one tab if you want to. This tab over here is it's like specific now to the Airbnb listing and reviews collection. And then it provides this filter thing here. So that is you can put find filters within here. And then if you want to, you can hit this options button and you'll get other options for things you may want to do. The main one you'd be interested in is most likely sort. So if you want to do a filter, you simply put it directly here. So in the example you gave, let me pull up the chat real quick. In your example here, this is a correct query, but you'll notice like this like db.listings and reviews, that is, you don't need to do that in the Atlas GUI. You would need to do this if you were talking, like, so you can actually talk to the database through the shell down here if you click this Mongo SH thing. And this is like the terminal syntax, which is a little bit more tricky. And what you have here, I think would be valid if you just pasted it in here. But the first thing you have to do is specify it's a little more advanced to use this. So you have to say use Airbnb to like make the context of what you're trying to talk to specific to that database. And then you would do this command that you have. So db.listings and reviews is the collection.count, bedrooms greater than 5. So this all looks correct to me. And then I guess we should use count documents. But then bedrooms. Yeah, so hold on, I think this is, think about this is wrong. Oh, my database is called listing and reviews. There we go.
Looking at it, that it worked on the very, where you click it to view the raw at the top corner.
So there, so what you did is correct, but only in the context of like using it in this shell down here. It's
Okay.
I only use the shell if I'm doing something more advanced. You can typically get what you need by just doing your filters up here. And it is always giving you a count automatically right here, you can see. So for most of these exercises, what I would recommend is just taking this piece and putting it here.
Ah, okay. I got
And
you.
then, and then you simply just hit find, and you'll notice it's giving you the count right here. 68. And it's kind of, it's showing you like the first 20 records as well. So it's got this like pagination thing as well. So if you just do your filter here, you can just find the count, yeah, right there, which is giving the same answer as, 68 there is the same as the 68 here.
Okay, I got it. All right,
Yeah.
thank you.
What are the new tabs again at the top? Does it allow you to save your queries and stuff?
Yeah, you might have a query and then you want to keep this one and then like run another one. And like,
So when you, does it save it? Or does it automatically save those tabs up there?
I mean, it'll keep them open and save it until you close it, yeah.
Query history as well.
Query history.
So is it a way for us to export our findings or,
Say that one more time.
is it a way for us to export our findings or,
Yeah,
how-
you can export. So you could, there's a export button right here you can see.
Oh, okay, export data. Okay.
And then it'll say, do you want to export the whole thing or do you want to just export the query that you did? Yeah, you don't need, I mean, you don't need to export it for the exercise, but you can export if you want to.
Okay.
Yeah. Good, yeah, so there's like, you got the first question correct.
Thank you.
If anybody on the call is having trouble connecting or anything, just let me know. Everybody good on the call still?
Yeah.
Cool.
Yes. I'm there.
On the call, did you guys get all the answers? Are you still working?
Doesn't have the word ID in it, IEP. And then.
I'm still working on the last one.
Okay. All right, we're gonna do another 5 minutes and then I'll go through the answers. And we'll go to the mongoose piece.
So in this Airbnb data set. It is interesting that they don't have the. Some key value pairs. In each document. It's like some. Fields or. Columns of data are just like not there, like the. Like what he was talking about, the review. Date time. Like on some of the objects are like.
Oh, it's just missing.
Missing.
Yeah.
So it's interesting that they store their data, I guess.
Well, this, keep in mind, this isn't like this isn't like a copy of an Airbnb database, like somebody like scraped. Airbnb data from their website and put it in their own database. I
So
believe.
it might have just-
Might have, yeah, it might not have been there. What was it? What was the property you were saying? Last review?
Yeah, with the last review time,
Yeah, so maybe they don't have any reviews. And so that would be, that property wouldn't exist.
yeah.
Yeah.
So is it better to keep that key there anyway, so even if there aren't any reviews yet, you can do the dot update and add a review? And add it to the like empty array that is reviews, or is it better to not have the key value here at all, and then when you update it, add that field to it?
Yeah, it's like, the answer to that kind of depends on what you're trying to do. So like better is maybe a little subjective, but I typically, if I have a property and I don't know the value of the property, we'll put null. So I'll have the key and then we'll put null as the value.
Yep, and so that way you can change it.
I mean, even if the key's not there, you can still add the key. Like when you do update, if it's null or the key's not there, it'll add the key and give the value, or just set the value.
So if you in like JavaScript, if you're doing like math, it's like looping through checking. Maybe that value or whatever, does it cause an error? Does it fill it in?
Well, if you ask for a property and it's the key's not there, you'll get undefined. And so undefined or null, like usually your code is going to handle that the same way. They're both falsy. So it's not a big deal.
It doesn't.
No. I mean, if you're trying to access a nested property, because keep in mind, we might have like, you can see it here. We've got in the data set, we've got like host is a nested object that then has superhost, or host is superhost. If for some reason one of these listings doesn't have host at all, like so there's no object there, and you try to do like listing dot host is superhost, like you would get, you're trying to access like key on undefined or null or whatever, you'll get an error in that case.
Okay.
So if you're doing like nested properties, or you're doing like an array of stuff, so we've got reviews. This is an array and that's empty. It's not null. So all of them, I think, have that reviews key. No matter what, that is nice. So if you have like a nested thing, like an object or an array, often it's good to either have just an empty object or an empty array. So that you can still do like, you could still do listing.reviews.filter or map. And those operations still work. They just always return nothing. Yeah. But yeah, I mean, there's some things that are maybe like, yeah, this is probably best practice, but it is also like highly dependent on what you're doing and how you're interacting with it. And MongoDB provides all these things for like, does the field exist? And that will work for whether or not the field is defined or null or whatever. Yeah. Okay, so the first question was, how many listings have at least one or at least 5 bedrooms? So you guys can see this, okay. And so the syntax there is, we're passing an object that's describing our filter. And we want to filter on the bedrooms property. So that's what we put as the key here. And then we need to do more than just equals 5. Because if it was just literally 5, we could just put 5, you know. and that's a valid filter. So get all the listings that have exactly 5, there's 36, but we want at least 5. And so the syntax for that's a little more complicated. We need an operator, which means we add this like nested object, and then we use greater than or equal as the key, and then 5. So this is it's this syntax of like how to filter stuff is so awkward in a lot of ways. But just keep in mind, it has to be a valid object. So if you're getting some sort of error, have all the time I'll do something like this, because it just feels like it just makes more sense to me. Like bedrooms colon greater than or equal colon 5. Well, this isn't a valid object. Because like you just can't, this isn't valid. And so like you'll just have to remember like, oh, like I'm getting an error here. It's not letting me click find because what I typed here isn't valid. And so I need to make this an actual valid thing. And now it'll let me find. I bet ChatGPT is probably really good at helping you write this stuff too, if you hadn't tried using that. Like if you like MongoDB query for what I, like, and it'll probably spit out what you need. Anyways, so this is the correct syntax for that question. There's greater than or equal, and there's also greater than, right? And in this case, I said at least 5, so we want to include 5. And so that's 68 is the answer to that one. How many listings are less than $100 per night? So we change this to be, I think there's just a price property. So we'll change bedrooms to price. And then we want less than 100. So that's 2,181 or less than 100 per night. I didn't give an example of this, but we can ask more than one question. We may want how many are less than 100 per night that also have at least 30 bedrooms. 111. So you can, if you need to do more than one thing, this is called an AND query. So price less than 100 and bedrooms greater than 3. So you can just kind of keep adding additional filters here. They are and though. Sometimes you might want or. So you might want price less than 100 and greater than or equal to 3 bedrooms, or price less than 200 and greater than or equal to 4 bedrooms. All those things you can do. But the syntax gets so hairy so fast. It starts getting nasty.
The or syntax.
So or is you do. So like if we wanted or on this, we would say or. Yeah, and you kind of group them like this. And then it's a nested object. Wait, no. Or so this is what an or query looks like. It's really gross. So yeah. So yeah, or takes an array of the filters you want. The filters you want are each element of the array is an object. So notice I kind of had to wrap these things to get them to be correct. So, and you can also do and. Like you could do and in the same way with an array, but if you don't do that by default, it's an and. So that's why when the first query I did, when I just comma separated the properties, it worked. It just defaults to and, because that's usually that's the most common. And so they make certain things a little bit easier. But yeah, here's an or, and we can run that and it's wrong. I did something wrong. Maybe it's this. There we go. A lot of their operators have the $sign in front of it. So yeah, there's 2,726 that are either less than 100 or have greater than or equal to 3 bedrooms. Okay. The next question was how many listings are for entire home apartment? That one's pretty simple. We'll go back to kind of our basic query. This is, my goodness, what is that? Is it the streetcar or is it a train? Oh, okay. So that's, the property for that is room type, so we'll do room. And notice that it knows the data that's in here. Like, it's just trying to be helpful, so it's like, predicting the fields for you that you're trying to filter on. So for this, we just do room type, and then this is just an equals query. So we just pass the string that we want to match on. And so there's 3,489 that are entire home / apartment. When was the first review and for which ID? So for this, we want to use sort. For that, you give it this object. And then you say the field you want to sort on, which in this case is, I think there's just a first review field. So you type first review, and then it's kind of a funky syntax. You give 1 for ascending and -1 for descending. You can also, I think, give it the string as well if you prefer, and it'll work. So you can do DSC or a SC. Yeah. I think this works. Let me double check. Yeah.
When I did it, the first one popped up has number of reviews 0. So like I did an extra filter to make sure that number of reviews is greater than 0.
Yep. So by default, when you sort descending, null values are first, which is kind of odd. So you can, so you'll basically need to say, hey, I need it to, you can either say it needs to have reviews, or because there's like a number of reviews property, so you could use that. You could see the length of the reviews array. You could say make sure that it has at least 1 item in it. You could also say like anything that doesn't have that property first review. Wait, that one. Wait, oh, sorry, we want ascending. Sorry. So ascending null is first. Not descending. So, and so ascending, the nullish properties are first. So we can say that what I did is I just said first review. There's a specific query called exists true. So we just say, hey, that filtered everything that has a first review. And then sort ascending. So the very first one is this one here, ID 11708, and the first review was in 2009. We can also, if we want to, notice there's some other options here. We can say like limit to 1 item if we wanted to, and just only get that 1 item. So skip and limit are important things that you'll use whenever we do pagination. Because like, you don't ever get 5,000 results on a page. It would take, you're just loading more data than you need. So you'll get usually 10. And then as you scroll, it'll either ask for the next page automatically, or you'll have like navigation buttons that you would use. And whenever you're doing a skip and a limit, you have to have some sort of sort on it, so that like you're skipping and limiting something that is always in the same order. Now, if you don't give a sort, usually it's sorting by the ID by default, but usually if you're looking at something, there's some sort of sort, typically by date. On Airbnb, the sorting would be how likely they think it is you're going to click on that item. Like they sort in Airbnb, there's like crazy algorithms to show you what they think you are the most likely to buy, like unless you specify a sort. Like where you would do like order by price or order by something else. So that was the answer to that one. And then how many listings are there where the host is a super host? For that, since it's a nested object, the syntax is a little bit different. Because we need a property inside an object. And so for that, we do. What's happening? So I'm gonna get rid of this sort and limit. And get rid of this and then do. And so if you need a nested property, you have to put it in quotes and you do host dot. Host is superhost. True. So there's 1090 for that. Cool. So that's just some basic filtering and sorting. You can do very advanced filters if you need to. You can do, like contains queries on strings. You can do date filters. Like, greater than this date or less than this date. You can do the and the or stuff like you saw. And like the and the or stuff can get as complicated as you want, right? Like, but yeah, that's kind of the basics for what we need. 90% of the time.
So are you normally interacting with this application and filtering, or do you normally do it through your code and stuff?
If I'm actually trying to like find an answer to a question, or I'm like trying to like look at the data or debug something, I'll do it through here. If I'm adding something to that app, like I'm adding an API route, or I'm adding like a new page or whatever, then you're, doing it through the code. But
Is it the same filter syntax? and stuff?
yes, assuming you use Mongoose, yes. There's this whole thing, which is like software that's for accessing your database in your code. And some of them like have their own syntax for how to add and query data. And then they write adapters for like every database you might want to use. So you like learn the syntax of that software. And then you could just like switch databases and none of your code would change. And there's like benefits and cons to that. Mongoose is specific to MongoDB. They're not trying to do anything but MongoDB. They don't care about SQL or anything. And so their syntax is very similar to MongoDB. And most people, if they're using MongoDB, use Mongoose, but there's this new one that's getting really popular called Prisma. That I've started using at work, that is like the case where you can like you write it in a certain way in your code, and then you could use Postgres or you could use Mongo, and you just tell it which one you're using.
How do you know when something gets popular? Is it like nobody's using Mongoose anymore or whatever?
Yeah, so if you were like trying to decide between Mongoose and Prisma, you would search like Mongoose versus Prisma in Google. You can also do Prisma GitHub and go to their GitHub and see how many stars it has, just sort of like likes. But more importantly, you would want to see how many people use it. So it tells you how many people have installed it and used it.
Okay.
Now, Mongoose is got bigger numbers than this. It's been around a lot longer. So if you look at Mongoose, you'll see it's got 25,000 stars, and it's where's their use spot?
Too many.
I'm not sure why. And you see 777 people have committed code to this project. I'm not sure why this one doesn't have a use. They usually all do. Oh, there it is, 3.3 million. It's a bit higher. 200,000 versus 3.3 million, but it's been used for way longer. Like it's been around for a lot longer. Mongoose has been out since, like when I first took OK Coders, we used Mongoose. It's been out for a while. Prisma is very new, but it's like rapidly getting popular. And it's like got a lot of funding and all this stuff.
It's just, it's interesting and then. Like Prisma, is it worth it to learn this new thing if like Mongoose starts like coming up with updates and it's like, or like something newer could come after you've gotten done learning Prisma.
Yeah, I mean, that's always like you gotta keep up with the tech that's coming.
Stuff doing that. I mean, I guess with coding. Pretty experienced with it, but it's not like you're.
Well, I mean, you get good at JavaScript and TypeScript. That doesn't change. And then like, once you've learned Mongoose and you know MongoDB, like the next thing's like, it's the same thing. But it provides like, maybe it's a little bit cleaner or it provides some certain benefits. So it doesn't feel like you're learning. It's not like your knowledge when you learned Mongoose and MongoDB goes away, still helpful.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Approach to search and things like that, while there may be several different syntax,
Yeah.
we have to look up.
Yeah. Yeah. It depends on what we're talking about. So it's like, if you've learned React and you join a project that's using Angular or Vue, that kind of sucks. Like that, you have to learn a lot of new shit. But if you're joining a team that uses React and they use a certain router that you haven't used before, they use a different ORM or whatever, it's not as big of a deal. Like it's not like a huge change of stuff you need to learn. It's like same old kind of thing. So yeah, switching from Mongoose to Prisma wasn't like a huge, I need to relearn a bunch of stuff kind of thing. Yeah. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about Mongoose. So we just interacted with MongoDB specifically, and we did it directly. So we talked directly to the MongoDB database and cluster. Now we want to interact with it from our code. So you could, like in Node, there's like a MongoDB driver that they provide, and you can just like connect to it directly, basically, and just use the syntax that MongoDB has for everything. And you can do that for any database, like any language you use, you know, there's like a driver to then be able to talk to the database directly from that language. And that's what, like Mongoose and Prisma both use that driver, but then they like wrap it and add additional helpful things for us. So most of the time when you're talking to a database, you're going to use what people refer to as an ORM, or in this case, Mongoose is called an ODM, because MongoDB has documents. And anyway, so that's just like, that's the term people use for software in code that manages your database for you, ORM or ODM. So what does Mongoose do? The main thing that it does, and the main reason we use it, is to define a schema and to make sure that our data is following the format that the API expects. So when we write our code, we want the data to be like in the format that we expect. Like we don't want like to just have random different properties there or not, right? So Mongoose is providing the schema and telling you if something is like failing validation for conforming to that format and stuff like that. And then it provides connection management. So usually when you've got an application, you'll have like a pool of connections to your database that your API will use. You don't need to worry about that. Like Mongoose takes care of it for you. And then basically from there, you are simply just like you wrote that filter, that object. You just pass those objects to Mongoose whenever you're doing certain queries. And so knowing the syntax that we just learned talking to MongoDB is the same syntax you'll use when you talk to Mongoose. So you'll say, hey, Mongoose, I want to query this collection and here's my filter, and it's the same syntax. So let's get an API up and running. So go to wherever you're doing your code and create a new Next app. So I'm going to walk us through all of this, but I want you guys to try to remember what that is before I do it. So if you need to make a new Next app, does anybody remember the command that you run? Yeah, so npx create next app, and then usually, or at least I've seen them put at latest in there. I don't think that's necessary. I don't know why they would have put it there if it wasn't. So at latest, and then space the name of the app that you want. So Airbnb. So we're making like a web app that will be like a Airbnb replica, basically. So you run that, then let's see if anybody remembers these answers. So do we want to use TypeScript?
No.
Nope. Do we want to use ESLint? Yes. Do we want to use Tailwind? No. Do we want to use the source directory? Yes. Do we want to use App Router? No. Do we want to customize the default import alias? Yeah, no is what we did last time. Okay. So that will start installing everything for us. Once this is done installing, what do we do?
Back into the folder.
Yes, so we'll CD into it. I would have, if you guys were, I did this a second ago just to test stuff. So I already had an Airbnb. So I made an in-class Airbnb. Okay, so if you were learning about Mongoose for the first time and trying to get started with it, almost everything that you'll just like any software that you're trying to add to your app, there's usually a quick start section, and that's usually the first thing I like to go to, and it will show you how to install it, which is almost always just npm install, the name of the thing. And then it will give you like a very, very short, like, just like, here's like, this will like do the thing that you want. Like, it's probably not what you need exactly for your application, but it's just like a rough, like, here's like how to get going. There's some code for how to get going. Now, typically, you'll need to search, like, if you're adding something to Next.js, which is the framework we're using for the front end and the back end, typically you'll need to search like add Mongoose to Next.js, or add blah, blah, blah to Next.js, add MUI to Next.js. And sometimes it's the same and sometimes it's slightly different. And so Next.js is super popular though, so there's always going to be blog posts or guides or articles on how to add something to it. And so that's what I did. I searched, Mongoose for Next.js, and they also have like an example in Mongoose for how to do it. But I'm going to provide you all what you need for it, because it's not really what we're trying to learn how to set this up. Usually it's set up for you. Okay, so we do need to do npm install, so in the directory. Do npm, there's like short, long form syntax and shorthand syntax, so npm install is the same as npm I. And then you used to have to do save, but it by default it saves it now, meaning it adds it to your package JSON for you. So you can just do npm I mongoose. And so it installed mongoose for us, and then if you look at your package JSON, you'll see that mongoose is in there now. Okay. So there's a few things we need to do. We need to make some code that will connect to the database. We need to store the string that is the URL for our database, like our username and password and the like host.
Envelope. Indeed, like we did an envelope.
Envelope. Oh, environment.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
ENV.
Yeah, so we'll make it a .env, yeah, to store that. So so let's do that first, so, let me, well, actually, I want to, so you're in your folder and you should have like at the root, you've got like your package JSON and your source. At the root, you want to make a .env. So add a file and do .env. The dot in the front means it's like a hidden file. So add that. In there, you'll paste your URL for your database. The syntax here is like, it's like a key value kind of thing. And so you'll do, you decide what you want it to be. And so what I did was this. So you will put, let me make this bigger. So in the .env, you will put MongoDB underscore URI. I chose that name. You could choose something different. Equals, and then you just put, doesn't need to be in quotes or anything. You just put the value of your database connection. When we connect to it with Compass, we didn't specify a database. Sorry, I'm using database like in sort of two ways, like for the whole cluster, and then I also like use it for like, you can make like databases inside the cluster. So this is our cluster connection. But then notice, so we just gave the cluster connection to Compass, and then it let us like see all the databases in that cluster. When you're writing an application, you're usually connecting to a specific database. And so you specify, here we're specifying the database that we want to connect to at the end. So you can see I have like the whole, here's like the whole cluster connection. That's at mongodb.net. But then I do /Airbnb because that's the database I want to connect to. And so whatever you named your database, which it should have been Airbnb, you want to add at the end there.
You said you put the extension Airbnb, oh, it's just flash.
Yeah, just /Airbnb at the very end.
Oh, well.
Okay.
You do the not listing interview or just the Airbnb cluster?
Just the Airbnb database. And then so we'll specify the collection name in our code later on. Yeah. Okay, so should have that. And then we're going to inside here, we've got our source folder. It's where we put all of our like actual code. inside source, make a folder called server. So we're gonna put, and I'm just deciding this name, this doesn't matter, but it's we're gonna put all of our server code, all our backend code. Inside server, make a file called db.js. And I just found this entire, I didn't write this file. Like I searched how to do Mongoose and Next.js, and I found a guide. And in that guide, they had this db.js file. Okay. So this, and so like, you don't need to know, well, we can go through what this does, but like, I didn't come up with this and write this. I just like found it, right? And then just used it. So let me just paste it in Slack real quick so you have it. So copy that, what I just pasted in Slack, and put it in the db.js file. You might be getting some errors like up here. You can just ignore that for now. We'll fix that in a minute. It's not an actual error. It's just an issue with VS Code. So you'll see we're importing Mongoose from Mongoose. At the top here, we're then getting our database URI from our environment file. So the way you do that in Node is you do process.environment and then the name of the thing. So that's what I meant by you can choose the name, because you're going to pull it into your code by that name. So that's getting the URL. If the URL is not defined, it throws an error. It's just kind of nice, just helpful. Doesn't have to, but it did. And then it's like gonna cache our connection to our database for us. So that's what's kind of happening here. But there's a function that we're going to export from here that connects to the database. So it's called db connect. And if it has a connection already, it'll use it. If it doesn't, then it will make a connection. And the connection is created by calling a method that Mongoose provides that's simply named connect. And you give it the URI. And it's a promise that will return whether or not it's successfully connected. So that's it. Really, all we're trying to do is call mongoose.connect, but there's a bunch of fancy crap in here just to cache the connection, to not like make a new, because what happens is that's what this connection pool stuff that I was talking about, like it takes a second to connect to it, but once it connects to it, it can actually keep it open. And so like whenever someone hits your API, it's like a much faster request. Just stuff you don't need to worry about. It's like all handled for you. So that's what this code's doing, is making that connection that can be reused. But you'll notice like in the Mongoose quick start, it's just like, just call mongoose.connect. So that's what's happening. All right, so now we've got this db connect method we can use to connect to the database in our app. We then also need to make a schema. So in their quick start guide, they show you how to make a schema here, which is a method provided by Mongoose as well. You can see, and there's all this like new syntax in here that's probably a little odd looking to you. Okay, so anyways, they're showing you what you need to do. I'm going to also provide this to you. So what you're going to do is make a file next to the DB called listing.js, capital L. And then paste the code I just sent you into there. So there's two things happening in this file. One is we're telling Mongoose the shape of our data in the database. Now there's a lot of properties in that file, like the bedrooms and all that other stuff. So you would need to tell it all those properties. But just to get started, I'm just putting just some a few properties to get started.
If we don't have a property listed, if we add a schema to our existing database, we didn't put in, like, for example, reviews, we just left out like that, would that throw an error? Or would it assume that's left with like anything?
So it, you can kind of configure it to do different things depending on what you want. By default, it will return that property when we ask for, like, when we query, it'll give us that property. If we try to create a new listing, like from our app, like, because like, you know, a lot of times when you're doing this, you're creating the data as well. It's not like there's a bunch of data in the database already. Like your app's going to make it. If you wouldn't be able to add a property to the database that you didn't mention here, because it'd be like, what are you talking about? Like what? Yeah. Yeah. And you can configure it to be like, hey, if this thing has a property that I didn't put here, throw an error when I ask for it. But that's not what it does by default. Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, I'm saying, hey, so this is defining the shape of our data. So we say we're making a new mongoose.schema, which takes an object, and then you specify the keys, which are the properties of the items in the database. I should use the mouse. And then you have this configuration object. There's a lot of different things you can put here, but at minimum, you put type. And this is kind of a funky syntax, but like you do capital S string if it's a string, and you do capital N number if it's a number. And Mongoose provides all these, what the options are. So there's like, and you can also do nested objects. You can do arrays. You can do dates, Booleans. So if you need to find out what's available, it's in their documentation. But this is saying, hey, we've got two properties. One's a string, one's a number. There's other things we can add here. We can put like a default value. If it's missing, it can like add a default value for you whenever you're getting it, and also whenever you're adding it. And a few other things that we can do here, but this is what you need at minimum. If we query this and name is a number, it will throw an error. Like if the data isn't conforming to this format, it will throw an error. And you can say like, you can configure it to say like throw an error and like blow everything up and like just blow everything up. Or you can say like just remove that record and don't throw an error. Like just give me all the records that do conform to this and ignore any that don't. So it's kind of depends on what you want. But that's what we did here. And then the second piece that we do is we say, we basically are just simply saying, connect this schema to a particular collection in the database, a collection name. So that's where we specify the name of the collection here. And then we're just creating a model that we can use by this name listing. And then we connect it to this schema here. And you'll notice it's doing another kind of fancy connection pooling thing, which is it's pulling the listing model from Mongoose if it's been defined. And if it hasn't been defined, then it defines it. Because like your code, like when you import this, like you might have multiple API routes that import this. So whichever one imports it first will create it. And then all the other ones after that import it will get the like cached version. You don't need to worry about that. You don't have to do this. But when I was copying the code from the example of how to do it in Next.js, this is what the code looks like.
And it's always gonna be the name of the file.
That's what you should do. Yeah, so you should, whatever you make this file name, you should make the same as this string here. You don't have to, but it would be confusing if you didn't. Okay, so now we've got a DB connection and we have a model. And so we can now make an API route that uses our database. So if I want to make a new API route, where do I go? Pages, API. And then let's just like hijack this one. Because they have like a default one for us. So we'll hijack this one. And we'll call this listings. Because this is going to give back multiple listings. Delete that. Okay, so we want this API route to talk to the database. Talking to a database is asynchronous. And so this function needs to be marked as async. Yeah, exactly, because we're going to use await. So we need to connect to the database whenever this is running, whenever someone hits this route, we need a connection to the database. So we just do await DB connect, because that's that method that we exported and doesn't know where that is, which is annoying. So you need to import that as well. Yeah, VS Code is like, you have to like restart it all the time and like the deal is it's trying to do too much.
Yeah, I noticed if I like rename the file or something, sometimes I have to close Visual Studio Code out.
Yeah. So we import that method from that file that we made, and then we just simply connect, which remember, like if it's already connected, it'll just give us back it'll just give us back a existing connection. Okay, so we make that connection, and then the second thing we do is we pull in our listing JS model. So we'll pull in import listing. So this API route, we want to return all the listings. And so we want to use our listing model, which is like the way that we interact with the database for that specific collection.
So it wouldn't be proper case in this instance, the file, it wouldn't be capitalized.
It is. I named it capital L.
For the API file that you're in.
Oh, yeah. So the API route is lowercase, the file. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, honestly, it's just a Mongoose convention to capitalize that file. It's not like, and I'm just following it. Yeah. All right, so now we have the collection imported. And if we want to find items, we want to like query the database, Mongoose has a method on that model. So basically what Mongoose gives us is if we look at listing, which is what we imported, it has a bunch of different methods for all the different database stuff you would want to do. So there's create, there's delete many, there's delete one, there's find by ID. A lot of times you'll like have an ID and you'll want that specific item. So they provide a find by ID. Find by ID and delete, find by ID and remove. I don't know the difference between those two. Find by ID and update, find one and delete, like all these exist. And so what we use to query for a bunch of items is find. So that's what we use. And this, this is where we start, like at this point, this is now sort of in the MongoDB syntax land. So this is where we can pass it a filter, like where we, with the same syntax of MongoDB. And remember, like our filters in MongoDB are objects. So it's this exact, like you could pass this literal thing. And that would be the correct syntax to it. So find, if you hover over that, takes a few different parameters optionally. So what we're going to do, because keep in mind, like, if we ran this currently with no parameters, it would try to give us back everything in the database for that collection. So for us, what we want to do is we want to say, we don't want to filter anything. We do want everything. So the first parameter to find is so you can see this is giving me kind of a description of this method. You could look this method up in the docs, or you can try to read this. It's kind of hard to read what's going on here. But what it takes is a filter, a projection, and an options parameter. So those are the three options. So filter is the first one, and then projection is the second, and then options is the third. So filter is like the filter syntax that you just used in MongoDB. So you can specify whatever filtering you want on a property, exact match, or greater than or equal to stuff, or and or stuff that goes there. The projection is what fields you want back. So our listing is huge, right? There's like a lot of properties on it. We may want all of them, which is what it will do by default, or we can specify specific fields to give back just to make the query smaller, or to make like the data response smaller.
What's the difference between doing that and destructuring it in your JSON response? Is it just quicker to filter your response back?
Yeah, so you could ask for all the properties, but then like whenever you're responding with the JSON, like remove properties. But if you do it this way, like the DB isn't returning all those properties. So like whenever you've got your front end, you've got your server, you've got your database, you make a request to the API makes a request to the database responds, the server responds. So if you ask for less data from the database, that's quicker. Yeah. So more importantly though, I don't want to return all the records. So there's an options thing here, which is where we can pass limit. So I want to limit to 10. Stop it. Stop it. Okay. Okay, so this here is, so we imported the listing model, which is like what gives us sort of like the collection that we want to talk to. We then called the find method to like filter for a bunch of documents. We didn't give a filter. We just like, so give us everything, like don't filter anything. We didn't specify any properties or anything, so it's going to give us all the properties. But we did say, hey, like only give me back 10. Like don't give me back all 5,000. Only give me back 10. So this is a valid query. We can await this because it's asynchronous. And so we can then do const listings equals that. So we make sure that we have a connection to the database. We then query the database. And then we just can simply respond with that data. Like it's coming back as an object or an array of objects. And so we can just pass that to the front end from the API. So if we did all this correctly, we can go and run this. How do we run our Next.js app? Close, npm run dev. Yeah. If you're like, oh, I can't remember the command, then you just go to the package JSON. And it has the options. Now, how would you have known whether to do start versus dev? Like if you were reading the Next.js quick start, it would have said run dev. That's how you.
Just in dev.
No, I don't think so. Dev is like a custom one.
It's for React.
Start. You can do npm start. But dev is like one that people at Next.js added to the template for you.
Make it, you have to build it before you do the run start.
Yeah. So you can also, if you don't know what commands are available, you can type npm run and then just hit enter and it'll just show you the available commands. And so we want npm run dev. All right, so now it's running. We can then go to the browser, go to localhost 3000 /API/listings. And it's working for me. I don't know if it's working for all of you. If it's not working for you, then you'll need to look at your terminal and see what errors it's giving. Okay, what I would recommend to be able to just see this a little bit better is going to your route and then adding a projection. Did you guys get it?
Yeah. Because I didn't do the app.
Oh, it didn't get it right.
Yeah. Yeah, you're saying that's not that.
I think it's working.
Clear it up.
Oh, there we go.
Okay, now I'm hitting reference this, go back. Okay, so some of you may have named your collection differently than me. And I think you did. So just make sure that in listing JS, whatever is here is the name of your collection in your database. And some of you, I think, have listings and review and reviews. Yeah. So just make sure that matches. It's always like a missing character. Yeah.
Yes, I know.
Are you gonna get?
I saw the error.
That's just in VS Code. You can fix that by changing your ESLint. So if you change your ESLint rc.json to be the one that I just sent you. It'll fix that. Is it working for you? All right, you guys got it?
Yeah. You should. With your file, they'll be download. Right.
Okay, so. you're-
So very good. This one, I was like, train for the sign, train for service. The same. I was at the DC and started walking around, and then we got the ball over there. So you're the rest of them, Johnny. Damn it, it's like a mirror. Yeah. She was what they did, like. Yeah, I love trying to figure out, here's plastic, regular card. I had told them about walking with this, or about one, I've never worked with their tribes, I run around in circles, like find out my life. They don't get around, like, fight the thieves.
All right, so last thing I'd recommend here is limiting the data a little bit, and notice it's returning all the properties. Even though like we only specified a few in our schema. So we can limit the properties to name. And what was the other one? Rooms? Bedrooms. And so the projection is like the name of the property and then 1 or -1 for whether it's included. Which is really silly and odd, but that's the syntax. To include it. So 1 is include. And yeah, 1 is include and -1 is exclude. So now when we refresh this, it's like just those properties. Okay. And we're limiting to 10, so that's good. If you wanted to do a filter, you could add it here and that would work. So yeah, that's it. Now your application is interacting with your database. Pretty sweet. So we got another hour if you want it. What I would recommend is try to hook this up to React, like try to display this data in your app. So change the index page to query this API route. And then try to render some of this data on the page. Doesn't have to be pretty, but if you wanted to make it pretty, you can make, you can install MUI and have a card, like a list of cards or whatever. Or you can just do the fetch and just like
show some of the data.